It's Coastal Gardener on the Talk Station FM 107.1. And joining us this afternoon, Sean Banks of Carteret County Agriculture Extension Agency. And pardon me, I keep moving the word cooperative. Yeah, you cooperate with people, I understand.
Right.
Okay. So rather than me starting off with all sorts of questions, of which I've got tons of them, as you know, what have you got on tap today?
Well, I was noticing today that my centipede lawn is starting to green up again.
That's not good because some of us haven't gone out there and done any pre-emergent.
Pre-emergent's okay to put down even if it's greening up. You just don't want to do a whole lot of post-emergence when the grass is greening up, because that's when the grass is most susceptible to the post-emergent herbicides.
Okay. And the other question, of course, goes to temperatures. And, of course, we've got cold weather coming back. We're in March, and as a matter of fact, that's at times our most, exciting weather patterns. We have a lot of snow in March and things of that nature.
Yeah, ups and downs a lot. Hopefully we'll get some rain again, but it's one of those times of the year when the temperature might be 70 degrees on Wednesday and 40 degrees on Saturday. So it's one of those things to really look out for.
Okay. Does that mean that you need to be careful when you're doing something to your lawn or your garden, your ornamentals, for example?
With the ornamentals, a lot of times you want to get your pruning done before the middle of March. This year, because we had such a warm winter, a lot of things are coming out of dormancy a little bit early. Mm-hmm. It's still not too late to do some of that pruning. I've got a class with a group on how to prune some blueberry bushes and some grapevines. And I expect that some of those buds will already be open, so it's not too late to go ahead and prune them. But they'll see some green, and the people doing the pruning with me are going to go, "Ooh, oh my God, he killed the plant! It's bleeding! It's bleeding!" And the plants don't really bleed. To have that dripping out of the end where you make that cut is actually a good thing. That means that the roots are working the way they're supposed to, because the roots take up the water and then they push it out the end of the stem, and that's a good thing. As long as there's water in the soil, that dripping is a good thing, and so that's not bad. Now, if it turns red, then you need to worry about it.
What do you do?
Put a Band-Aid on it.
Right.
I've never seen it turn red. It usually just drips clear. It's just water going through there, and there might be a little bit of sugars in there as well.
Right. Oh, you mean if the liquid turns red? I got you. Oh, I'm sorry. We're talking with Sean Banks. We're trying to kill plants here at the in our program of Coastal Gardener. All right, Sean. Obviously we're coming into that transition period, spring, but transition. And the other question I have, and you were talking a few moments ago about centipede. What about the circumstances associated with wind? Because we get a pretty windy season here in the spring, and nor'easters and things of this nature. If you're doing any pruning, and if you're doing any, obviously you don't want to go spraying herbicides in the wind, but if you're doing anything, do you have to worry about the fact that this wind will dry things out?
As long as we're getting rain on a regular basis and there's moisture in the soil, you don't necessarily need to worry about the wind drying things out. Yes, it's going to pull some of the moisture out of the plants, but as long as there's moisture in the soil, the roots will take up the moisture and replenish it. So that's not a bad thing. That's just part of the water cycle where the plants take it up and it goes out the leaves, and then it rains again, and the cycle starts all over again. So as long as we continue to get a little bit of rain here and there, keep the soil moist, then the wind won't dry things out. If the ground was frozen solid and the plants couldn't get any moisture out of it, or if it was really super dry, then you would have a problem with wind causing some desiccation on the plants, which would cause some of the leaves to turn brown.
Okay. And then related to moisture and wind, and of course the drought situation here in eastern North Carolina, I haven't been keeping tabs on that, but we've had a fair amount of rain. This goes to the lawn care. Should we start thinking about setting out our sprinklers?
Right now, I don't think we need to worry about it because the grass is just starting to come out of dormancy. I was just seeing a few green sprigs in my centipede lawn. My St. Augustine hasn't started coming out yet, which I expect it will shortly, even though we're going to have some cooler temperatures this weekend and then some more cooler temperatures the next weekend. I think as long as we continue to get temperatures up in the 60s and 70s, and the soil continues to have a warming trend, then the grass is going to come out of that dormancy and it's going to start to grow.
Now, some of this also has to applies to sunlight, does it not? The fact that we have longer days of sunlight.
Well, the longer days of sunlight is going to allow for the sun to warm the soil a little bit faster or a little bit more each day. And so, yes, some of that has to do with the day length activity. But as long as we continue to get warmer temperatures, the soil will warm up and then the grass is going to come out of dormancy more.
All right. We're talking with Sean Banks again, the Cooperative Agriculture Extension Agency. I've got to make sure I get the cooperative in there. What other items do you have on tap?
Well, I went to a turf grass training this week, and I wanted to mention that just a little bit because it wasn't all doom and gloom. There are some things that are bad things. Some chemicals are being taken off the market, but there are some new ones.
Yeah, wait a second. Doom and gloom?
Well, a lot of times when I go to these trainings, it's all this is being taken off the market and this is being taken off the market. And now this weed is a new weed in here and we don't know how to control it. And you just get this down. They actually talked about some really neat and exciting things that I thought were quite impressive. And I wanted to mention at least one of those on the air. There's a new grass, a new St. Augustine cultivar that's been released by NC State. It's called Sola, and it's going to be a darker green than the regular St. Augustine, and the texture will be a little bit finer. So instead of that really super coarse texture that you normally see or associate with St. Augustine, this one's going to have a little bit finer texture, maybe a leaf blade as wide as a tall fescue blade, with a green color about that of tall fescue. So it's going to be a darker green and a finer texture than what you would normally have with St. Augustine. Still cut it at the same height, so cutting it about 3 inches, it'll look more like a tall fescue lawn than it will like a St. Augustine lawn.
All right. Does it grow better again in shaded area versus high sunlight? What is its
Its preference is going to be that it'll grow best in full sun.
Oh, really?
But it will tolerate shade, which some of our other grasses, centipede and Bermuda grass especially, won't tolerate shade. St. Augustine is probably the best one for shade tolerance. Mm-hmm. It's also got a really good salt tolerance ability, so it does really well close to the water. And it does okay with a higher pH. Somewhere, if the pH isn't in that 6.5 range, give or take a little bit, it creeps up into the 7s. The St. Augustine will still do fine in that pH range.
Now, St. Augustine, of course, grows by a root system, right?
Well, it spreads by stolons, which is underground stems. A lot of people call it a runner grass, so it is a runner grass.
And is it, is this a very good region for St. Augustine?
Yes, we are in a great area for St. Augustine, especially since we have that salt spray that comes up onto the area quite frequently. So if you're having problems with your centipede lawn, centipede likes to have a pH around 5.5. If you check your soil pH and it's up around 6.5, 7.2, you might want to consider plugging in some St. Augustine and letting the St. Augustine take over, because the centipede doesn't like to have such a high pH.
All right. And then what about irrigation for St. Augustine?
St. Augustine, once it's established, is very drought tolerant. Mm-hmm. It will do best if it receives about 1 inch of water a week. Really? So if you do irrigate it, or if you have an irrigation system, 1 inch of water a week, and that doesn't mean water every day with just a drizzle of water. That means once a week, give it a full inch of water, let it get down into the soil. Then that will encourage the root system to go deeper into the soil, and that helps it to be more drought tolerant. And
let's go back to it, because you're reminding me of this. We've talked about this in the past. How do I go about establishing, how much water, how long I can run my irrigation system to generate 1 inch of water?
Well, most people already have their irrigation set up to run a certain amount of time. So what I recommend doing is going out, putting some straight-sided cans, whether that's soup cans, cat food cans, anything with a straight side on it. Just put those in different areas around your irrigation area. Mm-hmm. Let that cycle run for however long it's going to run, and then measure how much water is inside that can.
And you really want 1 inch. I mean, it's not just a quarter today, a quarter tomorrow, but you really want a full inch in that period of time.
what you want to do is you want to get that water deep into the soil, and
Gotcha.
that encourages the roots to go deeper down into the soil. So if you're only putting a quarter of an inch out in our sandy soil, that quarter inch of water might go down 2 or 3 inches.
Right.
You want those roots deeper than that, so
Plus
you
the
want more water.
Plus the fact you lose a certain portion of that to evaporation, do you not?
Right. The top half an inch usually is going to evaporate out of the soil, so you want to make sure that it gets down deeper into the soil.
Okay, we're talking with, again, Sean Banks of Carter County Cooperative Agriculture Extension Agency. I'm putting the cooperative in the right location?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Always trying to get his title correct here. We're talking with him, of course, here on Coastal Gardener. More to come. Stay with us here on the Talk Station. It's Coastal Gardener on the Talk Station, FM 107.1, and Lockwood here with Sean Banks of the Carter County Cooperative Agriculture Extension Agency. We've been talking about the whole transition here into spring. You mentioned, of course, turf. You went to a turf grass symposium. What are the things that you learned there, besides the fact that they've got this new form of St. Augustine grass?
The other thing I learned is about mole crickets.
I'm sorry?
Mole crickets. They're a cricket that just tunnels in the soil, and there's actually 2 different kinds. One's the southern mole cricket, and it feeds on meat, so it feeds on insects, earthworms, stuff like that. They're in the ground. The other one is the tawny mole cricket, and the tawny mole cricket is the one that feeds on the vegetation. So it's the one that's going to eat the root system of your grass. That's the one that you really need to be worried about. They showed us how to tell the difference between the two.
I was going to say, how do you tell the difference?
Well, the only way to really tell the difference between the two is if you pull them up. The tawny mole cricket has a space between the 2 front toes, and the southern mole cricket doesn't have a space.
Wait a second. We're not talking about big critters here. How can you tell?
You get a magnifying glass and you look really close.
Well, yeah.
But that was the easiest way.
How big do these crickets grow?
They usually get to be about an inch and a half long, so they're still really small. You'll still probably need a magnifying glass to look at them and see.
So you got to look one more time. The difference between the tawny mole cricket and what was the other one?
The southern mole cricket.
Southern mole cricket.
Physically, the way that you're going to be able to tell is you look at the toes on the front digger legs, and the tawny mole cricket has a space between those 2 front toes, and the southern mole cricket does not. They're really close together.
Okay. Where would you find them? Just out of curiosity. I mean, how do you go about finding them?
Well, they like to tunnel around just underneath the soil in really sandy soils, and so the easiest way to find them is to take a little bit of Dawn dishwashing liquid, or they said also a lemon scented one, or a green dishwashing liquid, and mix about a tablespoon with a gallon of water. They said 1 to 2 tablespoons with a gallon of water, and then pour that soapy water mix over an area, and just kind of flood that area, and that will bring them up to the surface.
All right. Do they tunnel? Do you see tunnels in the ground?
I've been out to a couple of places where the grass was almost completely bare, and it looked like little teeny tiny, about half-inch wide tunnels, kind of like if you've seen the mole tunnels, and they're about 3 inches wide. These were about a half an inch wide, and it looked just like a mole tunnel.
Okay. Since we brought that, okay. If you find you've got the tawny cricket, what do you do about it?
Well, if you find that you have the tawny mole cricket and you want to get rid of it, there are some.
Well, I'm assuming you do want to get rid of them.
I would want to get rid of it.
How do they procreate, and can they destroy a yard?
Yes, they do. They do make babies, so they'll lay eggs in the soil. Usually, a little bit later in the spring. Those eggs usually hatch around June or July. So if you can get rid of the adults before they mate, usually they're going to start mating in late April or May.
Okay.
We're starting to see some movement of the crickets now, so now would be the time to go ahead and try to control them.
That was my question. Would we be able to find them now?
Now we're starting to see some, and that's why if you have an area where you think they might be, go ahead and use that soapy water drench and see if they come up. Right now, the only ones that would be coming up would be the adults, so they're going to be about an inch and a half long, and they're brown in color. They kind of look like a regular cricket, but they have a bigger, what's called a pronotum, or a shield right behind their head over their front legs.
Okay.
So if you see those mole crickets, then you would want to go ahead and treat. And there are chemicals out there. There are a lot of pyrethroids. Permethrin will work. And then there's, let's see, There is a 7 product that has zeta cypermethrin, which is a type of permethrin.
Would it show it on the
And
package?
you'll on all insecticides, it has a active ingredients
Okay.
listed, and it's supposed to be on the very front of the package somewhere. Most of the time, it's towards the bottom in
Alright.
the either right or left hand corner,
Okay.
and it'll say active ingredients, and you can look for those ingredients. If it has THRIN at the end of it, it's a pyrethroid type product, and a lot of those pyrethroid products will work against the mole crickets.
Okay. By the way, if you do find them, is it a matter of just treating the immediate area, or do you treat the whole yard?
I would definitely treat the area that has the most damage because that's probably where they're concentrated, but it wouldn't hurt to treat a larger area. Like if all your damage is in the front yard, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to treat the whole front lawn, even if it's kind of isolated to one little area, because they're not necessarily going to stay right there where the damage is. They're going to go searching for more food. So they're not going to stay where the grass is dead. They're going to look for more grass roots that they can feed on.
All right. You brought up the word moles and voles.
Right.
We're starting to see them now, are we not?
There are a lot of tunnels out there. The moles are getting active. They're out there looking around.
What do we do?
Get a cat. No,
Step,
just kidding.
right, I know. And step on the tunnels.
You want to crush the tunnels back down so the roots don't dry out too much. But if you're trying to get rid of them, there are some
Dynamite.
There are some bait products out there that you can put out there. I don't know how well they work. Supposedly they work, and they are listed for use in North Carolina. But probably the easiest way that I've found to get rid of moles when I've had to get rid of moles in my yard is to go out and find a long straight tunnel, usually right next to a sidewalk or a driveway, or next to the house,
Right.
and then I'll push it down. Mark where I pushed it down with a stick or a rock or something, and if I come back out the next day and it's popped back up, I know the moles are still using that. And then there are some traps. They're deadly traps. They're spike traps.
You're not supposed to. You're not.
And I will set that trap and make sure that I push the spikes down in and then pull it up to set the trap. And then when they crawl underneath that, the spikes go down, and then hopefully
Is
it
there any
catches
way
it
to
and kills it.
prevent moles from getting into the yard? They love what they're after is the very thing that's keeping your yard alive, is it not?
They eat the earthworms, they eat the
Earthworms.
grub worms, they eat the mole crickets, anything that's an insect that's in the soil, they will feed on that. So yeah, they're kind of eating the things that are helping your soil to be healthy, but I don't know of any way to put a barrier out there to actually keep them
But
away.
you don't want to kill the. You don't want to remove the attraction to moles, then, do you?
No, well, a lot of people like to kill the grubs, but if you kill the grubs and you still have a healthy soil with lots of earthworms, then you've killed the grubs, which is a good thing because then they're not feeding on your grass roots, but you still have earthworms, so they're still going to come in looking for the earthworms.
Okay. What about voles? What's the difference between a vole and a mole?
The easiest way to remember the difference: mole starts with M, so it's going to eat meat.
That's right.
Vole starts with V, so it eats vegetation.
Oh,
So if your tulip bulbs or daffodil bulbs didn't come up this year and you've got some tunnels around in your yard, you may have voles.
the voles are smaller tunnels, though, are they not?
Voles are lazy diggers, so they will use the same tunnel that the mole uses, or they will
Really?
tunnel right underneath. They're kind of like a field mouse. They like to tunnel right underneath the grass roots or right under the grass. So if you got tall grass, they'll be in there. Or they like to tunnel just underneath the mulch and make those tunnels. So they don't like to dig down into the soil so much.
What about that? You mentioned mulch and moles. The moles, will they go into your flower beds?
Moles don't care where the insect is.
Really,
They're going to
they'll
go look for it
anywhere.
anywhere.
Anywhere. And
Yeah.
by the way, when you have an infestation of, I never see a lot of moles. Usually it's one or two, is it not?
It's the population density for moles is about two moles per acre. So if you've got
Really?
more than 2 moles per acre, you've got a really high population density.
Wow.
And so they do a whole lot of damage because they're doing a whole lot of tunneling. They have to find a whole lot of food in order to be able to survive. So one mole can do a whole lot of tunneling and a lot of damage.
They can. All right. We're talking with Sean Banks again, Carter County Agriculture Extension, Cooperative Agriculture Extension Agency. I jumped right into the moles and voles issue. I know that you've got your Master Gardener program going now.
Yes.
All right. Tell me about that. So, some folks, it's too late to register for Master Gardener, is it not?
Right. This year, my class is filled up. I have 14 students in the class, and we started this last Thursday with our first class. And we're going to learn a little bit about soils, because soils is important. If you don't know about the soil, it's kind of hard to grow what you're trying to grow. Then we'll learn a little bit about the plants themselves and how the plants work, the reproductive system, the food and water transportation system. So we'll learn a little bit about plants and how they function, how they work. We'll also learn a little bit about propagation. And then we'll get into learning about identifying weeds, diseases, and insects, and diagnosing the problems and that kind of thing. And we'll learn a little bit about how to answer questions. And then we get into the stuff that most of the Master Gardeners really want to know about, and that's how do we grow plants like native plants or ornamental plants. We learn a little bit about container gardening and a little bit about vegetable and fruit trees and berries and how to grow those in the yard and landscape. And then we may also cover a little bit this year of composting. So we learn a little bit of a whole lot of different things, and that way when people call in with questions, they know where to find those answers. They won't have all the answers already learned, but they'll know where to find them.
Real quickly, related to people calling in, how do they know to call a Master Gardener? What's the relationship? Obviously, they're calling your office. How does one get in touch with a Master Gardener?
Most of the county offices in this area have a Master Gardener volunteer program. I don't know if all of them have a room for the Master Gardeners to come in and sit down and answer questions. I know we do here in Carteret County, and I'm pretty sure they have one in Onslow County and one in Craven County, but I'm not sure about all of the other counties. But what we'll do is we'll have the Master Gardeners come in, and when people have called in and left messages, then they can return those phone calls and answer those questions. We also have an email that they can send emails to with pictures and stuff like that.
As we wrap it up, since we brought up Master Gardeners, and I'm aware of this weekend, of course, is the Home and Garden Show at the Civic Center, Carteret County, the Crystal Coast Civic Center in at part of Carter Community College, just off Arundel Street. Master Gardeners are going to be there.
Yes, they will be there the entire time the show's open. There should be somebody there to answer any questions or give any information out that you might have.
All right. To Sean Banks, and again, Carteret County Cooperative Agriculture Extension Agent, thank you very much for being with us.
You're welcome.
Coastal Gardener here on the Talk Station FM 107.1.